Hello and welcome to day 3 of the EMI-SIG annual meeting. We really hope you're enjoying the conference so far. It's our very first virtual annual conference, and so we've just had so much fun learning and growing together. I'm Carol Eifert. I'm one of the EMI-SIG coordinators, and it's my pleasure to introduce this session titled, Why Do You Measure Up? And it is presented by Caitlin Martinez, Heaven Talachi, and Jillian Const. Caitlin Martinez is the Readiness Assurance Coordinator for Los Alamos National Laboratory's Emergency Management Division. Caitlin has worked at LANL for more than 8 years, and she joined EMD in 2019 after several years in public affairs. Heaven Talachi is a student intern with Los Alamos National Laboratory Emergency Management Division. And while she's been completing her degrees in public safety and emergency management, she's also played an essential role in managing the organization's comprehensive metrics. Jillian Const is the Emergency Planning Program Coordinator at Los Alamos National Laboratory. And prior to working at the laboratory, Jillian worked in emergency management and preparedness at Waste Isolation Pilot Plant in New Mexico, what we call WIP, and at the Nevada National Security Site. Remember, if you have a question during the session, just use the chat tool to the right of your screen and type in your question, and then I'll relay that question to the panel as soon as their session is over. And now, please join me in welcoming Jillian Const, Heaven Talachi, and Caitlin Martinez to our virtual stage.
Hello, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Caitlin Martinez. I'm the Readiness Assurance Coordinator for Los Alamos National Laboratory's Emergency Preparedness Group. Presenting with me today are David Silver, who is an emergency planner for our group, and Heaven Talachi, who is the Readiness Assurance Specialist Student Intern with our team. As we all know, an important part of Readiness Assurance is providing leading indicators for risk for the program and understanding program health. Our presentation today is about how we used metrics to identify some risk to our program performance, and then also use the metrics to improve performance in that area. To provide a little bit of background on the operational landscape in which we execute our program, LANL includes 50 different work areas spread across about 36 square miles. Our operational hazards range from high explosives to radiological hazards. We have a complex organizational structure, so that includes 16,000 plus employees, and our areas are managed in what are called Facility Operation Directorates, so FODs. Our organization has many internal, LANL, and external stakeholders that we work with. To measure our program performance and identify leading indicators of risk, we use a variety of metrics to look at workflow, and again, identify those leading indicators of risk to program performance or compliance. Some of the areas we measure are exercise program compliance, protective action drill compliance and progression, emergency drill compliance and progression. Those are at hazardous material program facilities. Our emergency operations center readiness, our training and qualifications for EOC members, and workforce protective action training and completion. So our metrics are a lot more than numbers. As I discussed, they provide us some indicators for risk for program performance, and allow us to understand the progression of our operations. They're a critical component of our readiness assurance program. We use them monthly and quarterly to analyze and identify potential risk. We develop self-identified issues for those risk areas that are then managed through our issues management process. So we identify issues and then track those issues through that process and resolve them. And so this presentation is primarily about how in FY 2019 and 20, we identified a problem with our drill program compliance, our evacuation drill program compliance, using our metrics, and then use the same metrics or a revised metric to improve that area. So with that, I'm going to hand the presentation over to Heaven Talachi, who is the Readiness Assurance Specialist Student Intern. She primarily handles our metrics and works the magic on those spreadsheets and technical metrics, and then helps us present those metrics to our management so that we can make decisions about program performance. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Heaven Talachi, as Caitlin mentioned, and I'm here to talk about a little bit of history behind evacuation drills. So Emergency Management Division was non-compliant with the DOE Order 151.1D requirements for evacuation drills in the fiscal year 17, 18, and 19. For example, in fiscal year 2019, LANL did not evacuate several of buildings annually, only completing 76% of evacuation drills. We also noticed that the previous drill metric was based on a rolling time frame. That meant that if a drill was conducted on a specific date, it would not be due until a year later on that same date. This often resulted in work overload and also resulted in an uneven schedule to conduct evacuation drills throughout the year. As a result, the progression that failed in 2017 and 18 also resulted in non-compliance in 2019. With the history, I'd like to transfer over into why it is important to have a drill metric. We use our drill metric as a leading indicator for risk to compliance or program performance. Our metrics are often reviewed by our LANL upper management and include timelines that are based on compliance or identified program requirements. Our drill metrics is separated by operational areas, and our drills are conducted and managed by our deployed emergency preparedness coordinators that coordinate with facility management. Our drill metrics is able to measure protective action drills such as evacuations, shelter in place, and lockdowns, or larger emergency drills at hazardous material program facilities. With the importance of having a drill metric, LANL also faces unique challenges. One of these challenges is that LANL is one of many large sites in the complex. That means that we have to drill over 308 buildings each year. Tracking occupancy is a moving target as space is managed outside of the Emergency Management Division. This means we heavily rely on facility and operation space management data systems, which is not owned and operated by EMD. And we also heavily rely on our deployed emergency preparedness personnel to identify occupied buildings in real time. Another unique challenge that we face is that our deployed personnel have to work with the facilities to schedule the drills. That means there is no way to develop a building by building drill schedule as we do with our hazardous materials program facility drill metric. With our challenges, there are solutions that we have come up with. Upon this trend was noticed in the metrics, EMD did not maintain an anticipated evacuation drill schedule. As a compensatory measure, the Readiness Assurance Program team worked with an emergency planner to create a new anticipated evacuation drill schedule and metrics to pilot for FY 2020. I'd like to introduce David Silver. He is our emergency planner for EMD. He is also the maker of magic of this amazing evacuation drill metric. So I'd like to introduce him. Thank you.
Thanks, Heaven. I'm David Silver. I'm an emergency planner for the Emergency Management Division here, the Emergency Preparedness Group. As Heaven mentioned, we changed the schedule from what was a rolling progression to more of a fiscal year progression-based schedule. This new schedule reflects the number of buildings to be drilled each month in each facility operations directorate or each section of the lab, whereas previously it was just a schedule that looked at the number of buildings that had to be done over the course of a year, a rolling year. So what we look at now is we factor in the weather. Here in Los Alamos, we have a variety of weather patterns that move through. In the winter, it does get quite cold. So we wanted to factor that into the schedule that we built, and that's what we did. This new schedule looks at those patterns. In the colder months, we really focus on shelter in place and lockdown drills. And in the warmer months, we focus on evacuation drills. We also, to provide a little bit more buffer at the end of the fiscal year to get all of these buildings in, we end the schedule in August so that we have a couple months to catch up on anything that the schedule might not meet. So this is a graph of what the schedule looks like over the course of a fiscal year. And as you can see, the evacuation drills are in blue, the shelter in place drills are in an orange color. And then we also plot the average outdoor temperature for that month on the graph as well. So if you look across, you can see that in the more warmer months, we really focus on evacuation, as I mentioned, and then in the colder months, December, January, February especially, we really only focus on shelter in place drills. This new metric also really lets us look more in detail at each facility operations area. We can look at the number of buildings that need to be drilled each month, and then we can show a progression against that schedule as we move throughout the year. We also use a stoplight technique to raise awareness of risk at areas, so we can, there are leading indicators to determine if we need to refocus efforts on drills at a certain facility operations directorate. It also is a document that helps us track the drill documents, all of our drill plans and summary reports all the way through completion. Previously, we had no way or no metric that actually captured that information. We also are able to see where we are at currently within a fiscal year compared to where we should be based off this schedule. And it also helps us really distribute that workload across the fiscal year, whereas before there really was no way to balance out the workload since there was no schedule. This is kind of a view into what the new evacuation metric looks like on the back end. As you can see, we track the number of drills by building by FOD. So we can look over the course of a year at the number of buildings that have been conducted to date, a percentage of that, how many we anticipate to have been conducted based off that schedule, and then where we are in relation to that. And that's where that red, yellow, green stoplight takes into effect in the conduct status column. And then we can also see where the documents are in the course of their lifespan. And then we also have some other graphs that help us internally to look at how many drills have been conducted by FOD, overall evacuation drills conducted versus anticipated schedule. That's the graph in the middle. And then to really track those documents, we can look at a graphic version of that on the bottom right. So when we take that metric a step further and we look at how it's actually implemented at a FOD, that's what this graph is. So we can see specific to this facility operations directorate, how many buildings were anticipated to be drilled in that month and how many were actually conducted. So this, in addition to the overarching view, helps us really look at targeting efforts where we might be behind or need to put a little more work in, or if we know we're ahead of schedule and we can let a couple drills or a couple buildings move to the next month if we have a lot of other priorities. So this metric was new this year. This schedule was new this year. And we were really hoping that this year would be a great beta test to really see how well it works in actuality. Unfortunately, COVID happened. So as of March 9th, the pandemic really started impacting our normal operations at the laboratory. Before COVID, the new metric did prove to be pretty effective. We were ahead of schedule across all the facility operations directorates. However, on March 13th, our management did postpone all scheduled drills during the COVID response to support the social distancing practices, as well as the decrease in population at the laboratory. And as of the end of May, we have extended the suspension of all abnormal condition operational drills, protective action drills, which is what this metric looks at, emergency drills, and exercises indefinitely. We do continue to have some case-by-case mission essential drills that are captured in this, as well as real-world evacuation drills that may come up. That information is captured into this, so we do continue to update this on a monthly basis and put the metric out. However, we are substantially off track at this point due to COVID. So this metric is still being improved. Even though we aren't going to be able to use it to really validate how well the schedule worked this fiscal year, we're still looking at improving it. So one of the big things that we're doing is we're looking at refining how we track occupancy at LANL. As Heaven mentioned, there's multiple databases that currently track occupancy throughout the site, and we're looking at trying to identify a specific one which is the most up to date and use that data to feed into this metric. We're also looking at ways to automate some of the data that gets entered into it so it's less manual intensive, and also provide our deployed emergency preparedness personnel a real-time view into the data rather than currently it's in an Excel format, so it's harder to send out on a more regular basis. So we're looking to try to continue to improve it as we move forward. So we're interested to hear from you. How does your site measure and track occupancy across your site? And do you use, or how do you use metrics to support your readiness?
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation and all the collaboration that LANL did on that. Heaven, Caitlin, and David, rather than Jillian, apologize for the change in the bio. So David, we didn't actually get your bio out there, so everyone go out there and read David's bio and be sure and send them an email. And if you have questions for them, I have been monitoring the chat and I don't see any questions that have come in. So what I'm going to do is allow David and Caitlin, Heaven, if you have any closing thoughts or anything that you would like to add, let's go ahead and do that now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This is Caitlin Martinez. So first, I'd like to thank EMI-SIG for this opportunity for us to present some of what our program is doing. Like I said in the presentation, readiness assurance is a critical part of supporting our program's compliance. And our metrics are an important part of how we do that. But with that said, metrics are a fluid process. So we're constantly looking at ways to modify and change them, as we did back in 2019, to better support our program. And so we'd love to hear and learn, and it looks like there might be some opportunities for us to learn how other sites are doing this. And so we just appreciate that and are open to any questions that come up after the fact.
Again, and if you have further comments or questions, you can always find the contact information for our speakers in the speaker tab. And with that, Heaven or David, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, nothing at this time, Carol. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, if not, then we've reached the end of this session. We appreciate your attendance, and if for the next session, you are welcome to stay on this channel. And I guess I'm going to say the next session on this channel is going to be SRS Readiness Assurance, CRAD Metrics, and Trending Data. And it's with Carolyn Reppert and Thomas Roller. You just select it from the schedule on the left, and you're always welcome to join another session if you want to. There'll be a SBX demonstration or a workshop or user groups. And we just thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you soon.